The Old South has an abundance of haunted mansions, old family homes, and still standing plantations full of rich history, both good and bad, providing uncountable breeding grounds for ghosts. I think it's time we start exploring some of these here. And what better place to start than one that has been labeled as the most haunted house in Mississippi? Originally called the Bob House, and still listed on the National Register of Historic Places as such, this home has changed hands many times, and many of these exchanges have left its own imprint on the property in some way or another. Said to still be haunted by the ghost of Mary Elizabeth Howard, as well as the ghost of a notorious highwayman, and even still by a murdered owner of Union troops, let's explore the history and legends behind what is now known as the McRaven House. Everyone loves a good strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture, some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. Old Southern mansions are all across the American South, some still in private ownership, and some open for public tours. Most have been restored to reflect as much as its original time period as possible, providing a glimpse back into history and early Southern living. What makes McRaven House unique in this standpoint, though, is the fact that it was built over 3 different time periods. But as each new section was added, the previous sections were left as is. They were left mostly untouched, never updated. The construction, furnishings, and overall lifestyles of these individual sections were trapped in time. This led to the home being featured in National Geographic Magazine in 1963, calling McRaven House the time capsule of the South, preserving a way of life for these different time periods that could have otherwise been lost. The first section of the house, the Pioneer section, was built in 1797 in a tiny town called Walnut Hills, which is now part of Vicksburg, Mississippi. At the time, the house was only a 2-room brick structure, a bottom floor kitchen with a single bedroom above it. This was well before the house would be given any sort of official name. The small home was built by Andrew Glass, a highwayman, who was known to rob and kill travelers along the Natchez Trail. McRaven House served as his hideout, basically. The bedroom was only accessible by a ladder that Glass would remove at night to prevent any sort of ambush while he slept. The room still has its original plasterwork, and some say its original occupant, the spirit of Andrew Glass. It's said that Andrew Glass was murdered by his jealous wife in the home. The second portion of McRaven House was built in 1836 by Sheriff Stephen Howard. At this time, a patio was enclosed, and another bedroom was added as well as a staircase to access the upper floors. A dining room and 2-story covered porch was also added, bringing the house into the Empire period design. Sheriff Howard lived there with his young bride, Mary Elizabeth Howard. Sadly, Mary Elizabeth Howard would die during childbirth in the home in late August 1836. Many of her personal belongings are still in the home today. She was the lady of the house during the Empire era, and it would appear that she still holds the title of Lady of the House, even today. people say the ghost of Mary Elizabeth Howard still inhabits the McRaven House. In fact, curators and guides claim Mrs. Howard is the property's most active spirit. She is oftentimes found greeting guests and is known to play pranks on visitors. The third portion of the house was built in the Greek Revival style by John H. Bobb in 1849, a prominent brick manufacturer and sawmill owner. Under Mr. Bobb's ownership, a parlor, master bedroom, a new staircase, and various other rooms were added. Then known as the Bobb House, it wasn't long before the American Civil War swept through the area. During this time, the Bobb House, or what would later become known as McRaven, found itself forced into the role of Confederate battlefield hospital. With its close proximity to the battlefield in Vicksburg, McRaven was battered with cannon fire from both Union and Confederate forces. The house did take significant damage, but somehow remained standing. Ultimately, Vicksburg fell and came under Union occupation. On May 18, 1864, John Bobb, still owner of the property, came across a drunken group of 6 Union soldiers tearing flowers from his garden. Mr. Bobb ordered the soldiers off his property, but they only laughed before hurling insults and curses at him. Mr. Bobb then picked up a brick and slung it at the group, knocking a sergeant to the ground. The soldiers then left, but not before vowing to return and burn the house to the ground. John Bobb reported the incident to the Union commander in Vicksburg, a General Henry W. Slocum. The general said he would take action against those responsible, but it's reported that he said that somewhat dismissively. By the time John Bobb made it back home, there was a group of 25 Union soldiers waiting for him. They took Mr. Bobb to a place known as Stout's Bayou, about 100 yards from the house, and fatally shot him in the face. John Bobb's death was the first act of violence, well, the first documented act of violence of Union troops after the siege of Vicksburg. John Bobb's widow, Selina Bobb, sold the property to a realtor 5 years later in 1869, before moving to her family's plantation outside of New Orleans. McRaven House was eventually sold to William Murray in 1882. Murray and his wife Ellen Flynn raised 4 daughters and 3 sons in the home. William Murray died in 1911, his wife in 1921, daughter Ida in 1946, and a son in 1950, all within the walls of McRaven House. From this point onwards, William's daughters, Annie and Ella Murray, both unmarried, lived alone in McRaven with no contact to the outside world except for with their doctor. As a matter of fact, with the exception of a telephone, the 2 women lived with no modern conveniences. In 1960, Ella Murray died at the age of 81, and Annie sold the home after moving into a nursing home. At this point, the house was in such a state of disrepair that nearby residents of Vicksburg had no idea it even existed. The upper floor was completely overgrown with vines, and it's said that the 2 sisters had even resorted to chopping up antique furniture for firewood. In 1960, McRaven House was bought by O.E. Bradway, with the idea of opening the home for public tours. In just a year's time, Mr. Bradway was well into cosmetic restorations and tours had already begun. On January 8, 1979, McRaven was added to the National Register of Historic Places. Later that year, the home was sold to Charles and Sandra Harvey for $75,000. The Harveys then took the restoration to the next level, a restoration project that topped out near $100,000. Expert plaster workers were brought in, and samples of the carpeting from the John Bob era were sent to a company in Georgia to be matched perfectly. The Harveys made sure that every little detail was restored with as much historical accuracy as possible, room by room, floor by floor. When making it to the attic, they found damaged rafters from the Union cannons still in place, so work was set to secure the structure while preserving anything and everything they could. By 1980, the house was once again opened for public tours. Though the Harveys or their children never lived in McRaven, they spent many nights there protecting the property from vandals during the restoration project. In 1984, the Harveys moved to Natchez and sold McRaven to Leland French for $275,000. Somewhere in all this, the home became known as the McRaven House, named after the street it resides on, although now the name of the street has been changed to Harrison Street. Mr. French continued McRaven's restoration and became the first owner since the Murrays to reside in the home. Aside from a modern kitchen and bathroom in the basement, McRaven has remained historically accurate and unchanged since the 19th century. The current owners, Stephen and Kendra Reed, bought the house in 2015 and are the ones that have opened McRaven House up, not only as a museum, but as a paranormal attraction as well. Once a month, the home is open to overnight investigations, complete with the latest paranormal investigation equipment provided by the property itself. As far as the hauntings of McRaven House, it seems to be more due to the amount of deaths rather than a single event. The ghost of the first owner and highwayman Andrew Glass seems to stay confined to the original section of the home. People report a heavy emotional feeling in the room. Women report being touched, while men often report sudden bouts of anger. Members of tours have reported being shoved in the pioneer section of the home, and one person has even fell hard enough to require stitches. It's reported that Andrew Glass is the main source of negative energy in the house. A priest has been brought in to bless the house, but they say this only slowed down the ghost of Andrew Glass. In contrast to Mr. Glass, the ghost of Mary Elizabeth Howard is a friendly spirit by all accounts. In fact, the guides at McRaven House say Mrs. Howard is the friendliest ghost you'll ever meet. She's not shy about showing up in photos, or even in person in her former bedroom or on the stairs. Pregnant women often report a soft pat to their tummies, and there are also instances where children have been led away from tours by someone matching Mrs. Howard's description for playtime, apparently offering to babysit for visitors. John and Selena Bob are also still present, seeming to keep themselves to the section that Mr. Bob had added to the property. He has been seen pacing the outdoor veranda. There are phantom smells of cigars off and on, and all of those are attributed to Mr. Bob. And whenever the unexplained scent of roses arise in the house, they are said to be the presence of Selena Bob, which usually occur in the downstairs bedroom or veranda. There are also various spirits of Confederate soldiers that appear in the house and the property grounds, more than likely due to the existence of a mass grave behind the home of those that passed during McRaven House's brief stint as a battlefield hospital. And let's not forget the amount of Murray family members that passed away within the walls of McRaven. 5 of the 7 family members to live at the home, to be exact. EVP recordings of full conversations between Murray family members have been captured in the parlor, and by all accounts, it would seem the entire family have been reunited in death and continue to enjoy each other's company. Whether it be the Murray family members taking the phrase family forever home to the next level, or spirits of others trapped there due to extreme emotional tragedy, there seems to be little argument as to the validation of the hauntings at McRaven House. And with the exception of Andrew Glass, all the other spirits at McRaven House seem more than willing to let you know that they are there. In a friendly way, at least.